Welcome to the podpodcvlcast, where we talk about life, love, learning, and libido, and share our journey through polyamory. I'm Max.
I'm Erik.
I'm Chastain.
I'm Hannah.
Good job, guys. That was spot on.
We always go clockwise.
I didn't know what order we were going in.
We don't always go clockwise.
We don't.
Oh, man.
No, we go counterclockwise. We go Wittershins.
That's why I always do it wrong.
I always go lockwise.
I always go cockwise.
Yeah, you do.
You're
nasty.
I am nasty. Do not say nasty, Chasty.
I wasn't going to say anything.
Okay.
I was deflecting the dog.
He's settling down in his blanket. He'll get comfy.
Defiant, but comfy.
He wants to bite.
This is a podcast about love and relationships, sex and kink, and polyam issues, and whatever else comes up. While we talk about these things, we will probably also touch on stuff like abuse and violence and mental health challenges. These can be difficult topics, so keep that in mind moving ahead.
Thank you. When you said abuse and violence and mental health challenges, I wanted to go, if you're lucky.
Oh.
I don't know why.
Whoa.
Basically, all the good stuff.
All the good stuff. Max, you said you have a question for us today.
Yeah, kind of like I kind of gave you guys an idea of what I wanted to talk about with old Subaru Flask over there. You were just drinking so daintily from your flask.
I was
It great.
trying
You
not to
said
have
dainty
flask
motherfucker.
noise.
You don't want to gurgle.
Oh, where's my liquid?
I generally gave you guys an idea of what I wanted to talk about, but I wanted to kind of get a genuine reaction. This is a little bit different, but still.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I know the answer for Chastain. So, for Hannah, rather. So, Chastain and Erik, do you guys have any experience, any exposure to Leisure Suit Larry?
I do.
Yeah. Did you actually play Leisure Suit Larry?
No.
I played a little bit of Leisure Suit Larry 6.
But I watched
Leisure Suit Larry?
6.
But I watched Leisure Suit Larry compilations and masturbated to them.
Okay. So, you will be able to help me out. Because I never played Leisure Suit Larry. Hannah, Leisure Suit Larry was, it started as a PC game. I think there was also one PlayStation version
Oh, I didn't know.
of an adult meaning not really pornographic, right? It didn't
was
actually show anything.
porn adjacent.
But like adult
it was
video
suggestive.
game, computer game.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was that you play as Leisure Suit Larry, who's this kind of hapless loser who's trying to get laid, right?
Okay.
Like his whole purpose in life.
Yeah.
It's like the anime dating games that they have now, where your goal is to like get asked out on a date and then get to first
okay.
base or what have
Yes.
you. Yeah.
But in like
Thank you for putting it
90s.
into millennial context.
I was trying to make sure Hannah understands.
I haven't played these, but I have seen all the advertisements.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So these, I was 13 or 14, maybe, probably a little younger than that. Definitely a little younger than that. I'm going to start over. I was like 11, 12 when I heard about this. I was like early middle school, like 6th grade age. And I was, we shouldn't use the word obsessed because people really struggle with actual obsessions. But I was obsessed with this thing as a like budding pubescent.
Mm-hmm.
And also, there were other games like Dragon's Lair where some kid at school would tell you, like, oh, if you complete the last level, like, you see Daphne naked. And there were several of those, right? And there were several of these, like, secret things. And as, like, a pubescent adolescent, like, I was so obsessed with this stuff. And you always had the, like, liar kid at your school who was like, my uncle works at Nintendo and he told me. But I was, again, like, sex, even though I didn't know or understand what sex was, like, seeing a naked lady was all that I thought about.
Yeah.
For a long time.
Yeah.
So, Erik, Erik, you said you actually played one of them?
Yeah. I grew up with a Macintosh in the house, and there were no games for Mac. But, and I don't even remember where it came from. There was, like, some sampler pack when we finally got a CD-ROM that
We're all very old.
had a few different games on it, and one of them was Leisure Suit Larry 6.
It was like
and I knew nothing about it. It was just something that I had. It was there, and so I installed it and played it, and it was a real shitty game. But I do remember at one point there was like some chick in a hot tub that you were talking to.
Yeah.
And that was your goal, was to get with this chick in the hot tub. And I wanted to achieve that goal.
And last night you were in a hot tub with 2 chicks, so high five again.
Oh yeah, that's right. It was.
Living the dream.
He was living the dream.
So it was a legendary thing. Like, it was always, oh, my uncle has this game, or my like older brother has played this game at his friend's house.
Yeah.
It was not a thing that like existed in actuality. Where did you see clips of this, Chas?
When I was in college in Kentucky when I was 18, 19, and I had access to a T1 connection. Mm-hmm. So therefore I had access to porn. Mm-hmm. Because prior to that,
it would take 5 minutes to download a picture.
Yeah, exactly. But
right.
I could actually watch actual porn. People had made videos of the little, of the sexy cuts of these things. Mm-hmm. And my first internet porn was always weird cartoon porn. It took me a while. I mean, I watched Skinamax from a very early age, and anything with nudity in it from a very, very early age. But actual animated stuff, I didn't realize why. Didn't know why I was into it, but I was into it. So I would always look up cartoon stuff, and it came up in a list of I was looking up Flintstones porn, and in the school library because that's smart. And yeah, so it was something that I saw in college. And so I the hot tub, the thing in the hot tub, and kind of the, the girl, you get the girl in the bedroom sort of stuff. That stuff was enough for me to go oh, I'm going to have a little me time now, which my roommate in college, I'm sure, really appreciated. So.
Wasn't it weird how hot tubs were an 80s or maybe early 90s, marker of sexy, right?
Yeah.
There were those Cinemax movies that were the hot tub bikini company, or, whatever it was. A lot of
Bikini Car Wash was a big one.
Bikini Car Wash. I
watched that a lot, yeah.
Yeah, anything with bikini in it. But anyway, I've heard a couple references to these kinds of things, these legendary, sex and video games things, and it made me, recently, and it made me start thinking about this time as an adolescent, when, again, I didn't really know what sex was.
Right.
I just knew I really needed to see a naked lady.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk to you guys about that and about your experiences with that. And I wanted to talk about whether we feel that we can answer this question right now, yes or no, whether we feel like that is absolutely normal for everybody across the board, or if we feel like we are people who grew up into having casual sexual encounters and relationships with other people. We are people who grew up into having open relationships. And is it different for us? Is it because we were those kids that we grew up into being who we are and having the relationships that we have?
I have a lot of thoughts about this, so I'll let somebody else go first. Because I have a lot of thoughts about this.
Well, in a way, I was going to say no, because I didn't grow up
with that person.
Well, no. I didn't start out with those origins.
Okay. Hannah, do you have anything with your very different childhood? Do you have any experience with these kinds of things, seeking out something with sexual titillation to it? Or
so I think mine was quite different, and not in an exciting way, because those sort of secret moments where I was hiding and trying to figure out a thing that I thought might be important or sexy, even though I wasn't sure what sexy was supposed to be, were actual anatomy textbooks and Wikipedia search rabbit holes where I was trying to get any information.
Wikipedia.
Yeah, that was exactly. It's the same thing for me, only there wasn't, computers.
Right. So yeah, if I hadn't had access, not super closely monitored access during my mid and late teens, I would not have had any sources of information for this.
You really did grow up in it. Because, you were born in 1989. 1989 was my first year online. We had my dad had Prodigy, and you could get online and check the weather, and there were chat groups and things and little games you could play. And I had a Prodigy account.
Back when there were 15 websites.
Yes. And I didn't even understand what the internet was. And then when I was 13, 14, having like access in boarding school, but also my stepdad had the internet, so I could go use the internet, and I would stay up all night talking to very much older men in an inappropriate way on the internet when I was a teenager. So that was, there were like, I didn't have a concept that I could just go look at naked people on the internet. That didn't happen until my late teens. Yeah. So you just grew up with that all the time. Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
That's true. But yeah, what to look for. I was an innocent until, 15 and
6
later.
months ago.
Yeah.
Until 6 months ago when y'all revealed the secrets of the universe to me.
In that sense,
With our dick.
I wouldn't have said
Our
your
collective
collective dick.
Our collective dick.
Wow, that derailed what I was saying.
Please, Eric,
I would
continue.
have classified myself similarly as an innocent, but not with intent. Like, and it was purely an access issue. I didn't really have any access to things that.
Yeah,
but
you had access to girls.
Certainly sought it out. Yeah.
You had access to girls.
Yeah, he says.
Yeah, I did have access to girls.
Because he was in
the skating
yeah.
and whatnot. It was
girls in tight clothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first experience with like just seeking out, like just seeing a naked body that I recall, and I don't remember how old I was, but I was pretty young. I've talked about that my dad and my uncle's drag race and stuff. I spent a whole lot of time in garages, and there were always like bikini calendars and bikini pinups and stuff. But one of the race shops that we would spend a lot of time in, behind the door, had an actual Playboy centerfold. And every chance I got, I would like sneak away and close that door so I could
just
see
to look at it for 15 seconds and then not get caught.
Yeah, and not really know, what it meant, why I found this exciting, why I was, fascinated with looking at this.
Yeah. Oliver's just crashing into Hannah
Just
over
trouncing.
here. Now he's sitting on her.
Oliver felt like Hannah needed some comfort.
He did.
I do.
He always goes
really
to Hannah.
This is really uncomfortable for me, actually, because I regularly, like daily, masturbated from the time I was 8 or 9. So the process of like coming into a realization of actual sexual attraction was very confusing and upsetting for me.
No, I'm with you.
Because I had to reconcile all of like that had been processed through a completely different lens. Like I didn't understand how to feel about it. And I was like, well, this can't be sexual because I didn't know what sex was. So like I don't think I'm morally culpable for all of this, but I didn't understand how to put it together. So
should I start talking now? Okay, so I started masturbating when I was 3 or 4. And I was the
Eric's face was great.
What face did you make?
I couldn't make it again.
Shock. When I was 3 or 4, maybe earlier. I don't know. I just remember masturbating, and my fantasy was a witch would capture me and tie me up over a spit, and I would like be kidnapped and tied up, and I would masturbate to that. I don't know where I got that information or that visual or anything.
You know what's going to happen? One day you were going to somehow like see that scene in the movie that you saw it in, and
you'll just disappear.
I will.
The singularity will.
It will. So.
And it'll sound like this.
Who says it doesn't sound like that now?
Well, how do you know?
In this case, anyway, go
whatever.
on.
Moving on.
Go on.
So when I was very young, I had access to girly mags, Penthouse, Playboy, and Hustler. My dad had them. He had boxes and boxes and boxes of them, and he would openly read them. Just around, he would read the articles around us. And so it was frequent that it was just sort of left out on a table or something like that. And it wasn't this big deal. Like it was, I had 2 teenage sisters who were much older and they had boyfriends and stuff. I didn't have any concept of what sex was, but I definitely had a concept of what boobies were. And I knew I liked boobies and I wanted to see boobies all the time. Boobies made me tingly in down below regions. And so, I didn't start seeking out sex scenes in movies until I was a little older. It was when I had a TV in my room and then I could watch Cinemax and stuff. But any movie with any boob for just a split second, Like, I think in the movie Big, there's a bra scene and he touches her boob and I mean, that'll still send me over the moon. Like, that's enough.
Yeah, you and I, Chastain, have talked at much more length than we should have about the like 5 seconds in European Vacation.
Yeah.
Which I think was the first time I saw boobs in a movie.
Yeah.
And was like an awakening moment.
It was a growth boner. So I had access to that at a very young age. So I started objectifying women at a young age, and also viewing myself as like, my goal was to grow up into somebody that people looked at the way that I was looking at those magazines.
Okay.
The way that I was looking at. And so my mom would tell me that masturbation and stuff wasn't wrong, but that, like, you shouldn't do it. She didn't really have a good reason for that. And then she would tell me these stories about my grandmother, like, consistently, like, checking, like, popping into her room when she'd gotten home from a date, and if mom's nipples were dark, she had sex.
Oh God, no.
Yeah. So my mom would, like, she got these, like, spot checks to make sure that she wasn't having sex and stuff. And so my mom grew up.
I don't understand that at all.
I don't either. Apparently, if you have sex, your nipples get darker. I don't understand.
I've never noticed that.
That's not a thing that I think happens. Anyway.
No, I'm pretty sure it isn't.
Yeah. So my mom grew up with a sexually repressive household where sex wasn't appropriate or things you talked about. So my mom then didn't talk about it. But my mom also was, like, dating around when I was young after she divorced my dad. And so there were boyfriends and things, and I was aware of, like, her sleeping in the bed with people, but it didn't connect sexually to me at all. So I sought out movies. I saw, like, anytime I was at my dad's for the summertime, I was checking out boobs, just boobs. And I remember at one point I was like, it was my step sister and I were looking at like a Hustler together, and there was an erect penis in it. And she was like, "Oh, I want to see more of this." And I was like, "No, but boobs." And I didn't understand why. I had no reaction to an erect penis, but I was all about boobs. Like, I didn't have any reaction to the male form whatsoever. I didn't realize that had anything to do with sexuality. I didn't have a concept of what, being not straight was at the time. So, it wasn't until middle school or high school. I think that my objectification stuff of women and the objectification play I like to engage in now definitely comes from that. Like, this woman is here on display for me to enjoy. And I enjoy that in kink and such. And I also enjoy being objectified, because it's something I find sexy to objectify, but it's also sexy to be objectified. I like the idea of people just being aroused by me, just by me existing. I really like that. And I think that all comes from, pop culture exposure to women who are being objectified. Women's bodies, women's breasts, everything. When, I think it was in Life of Brian, we mentioned Life of Brian last episode. In Life of Brian, you see, like, full bush. And that was the first time I ever saw, like, a lady's downstairs parts. Like, because, I mean, remember seeing it and actually paying attention and going, like, oh, that's a thing I'm curious about.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was my response in seeing that one centerfold that I was talking about. Mm-hmm. Or I also had the, like, childhood friend whose dad had the subscription to Playboy mm-hmm. and the cabinet full of Playboys. And I guess because they were around, this friend wasn't really interested in them at all.
Right.
But anytime that we were left in the empty house, like,
yeah.
I was.
That's where you were headed.
Yeah.
Cabinet.
Oh yeah, I knew where everybody's porn stash was all the time.
Yeah. Like in town.
Just just
get a map.
Just if my sisters had anything that was untoward, I would know where it was because I would snoop through their shit. Hey Beth, how you doing? Shout out to my sister who's probably going to listen to this. And I was also sort of obsessed with like seeing my sisters naked just because they had boobs and I didn't. When I got boobs, I would spend a lot of time like looking in the mirror at my boobs and going like,
you surpassed me.
Hey, those are, I did. I have the biggest boobs of them all.
The student has become the teacher.
The titty teacher. So yeah. And I remember being in grade school and somebody like talking about how perfect my boobs were. And I was like, yes, thank you. I do have really nice boobs. And it was just like boobs were this thing that I wanted to see all the time. And even to this day, if there's a sex scene, sometimes some of the porn I watch is just compilations of movie sex scenes because that was what I was used to getting off to when I was younger. So that's my long ramble about, like, I think that society made me a lesbian. Like, pop culture made me a lesbian and also made me objectify women in a healthy way and have really bad relationships with women.
I think you probably want to go back and nuance that point a little bit.
Yeah.
All right, I'm kidding. I'll probably edit it out.
Yes, we don't believe that that's what happened.
Porn doesn't make you gay, but it doesn't hurt. Corn.
Like the
new
backwards
metal
K?
band.
I've watched, no, that corn, don't listen to corn with a K. But corn with a C, I've watched some weird insertion videos.
Oh, God, dude.
Sorry.
I'm starting to regret this.
And I'm done. I'll be over here now.
Yeah, I had the thing, like, we had HBO and Cinemax as a kid, and, like, you would get the monthly programming guide and would scan through. There was a little parenthetical thing at the end of every entry.
Yeah.
And scan through anything that said N or what was it? Sexual situations.
SC.
Sexual content.
Sexual
That's what it
content.
was, yeah.
Or
anything like that.
Or
like
BN, brief nudity.
Yeah, and sort of mentally highlight that as like, oh, how am I going to engineer staying up past 10 on this Wednesday evening?
So in the early to mid 90s, Cinemax would do a Shannon Tweed softcore marathon on New Year's Eve.
Shannon Tweed.
I fucking love Shannon Tweed. Shannon Tweed, like, that's why I like Trashy Blondes.
Is she the
Shannon
one married
Tweed.
to
yes. Gene Simmons?
Gene Simmons.
Yeah, she's married to Gene Simmons. And she's still looking good. I'm still into it. Anyway,
she can get it.
So I would like get the cable guide and get the TV guide, and I would plan out, like, I'm gonna go to bed at this time so that I can see Emmanuel in Paris or whatever. And then New Year's Eve, I would stay up and watch the ball drop with my parents, and then I would go drop a different ball up in my room by myself.
Whoa, dude.
I don't know how I feel about that.
I don't know what the ball is.
Yeah.
And I don't want to know.
The ball was pretty much...
No, I don't want to know. All right, so I think we've touched on, like, our experiences with that and whatever, right?
Yeah.
Except to say that, like, another thing that I've been thinking about from my own childhood, this is less childhood, like early teenagerdom, was I've gone to the, local theme parks a couple times recently. I was at Busch Gardens last night. And I was thinking about in those, like, 14-year-old time period, how, like, all I wanted was, like, to engineer a situation to be alone with a girl. And I was a weird, awkward kid. I didn't have a chance to be alone with girls. And, like, every time I was at a theme park, I'd be like, if I was here with a girl, like, where would we go to be alone that I might, like, kiss her?
Yeah.
No, I had the same thing.
Yeah. Theme parks had that sway.
And had the allure of, like, oh, these aren't girls from my school. These are different girls.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, maybe these girls will want to kiss me.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I've been thinking about that a lot with these couple times in the last couple weeks that I've been at theme parks.
Yeah. That was definitely a part of my teenage years. I was so... I will use the word obsessed because I was obsessed. We talked last episode about how creepy I am. And because I would, like, inventory stuff.
Let's call a spade a spade. We talk about that in every episode, just a little bit.
I'm very creepy, okay? Deal with it. You still hang out with me. What does that say about you?
Yeah.
So, about how creepy I am, like, I was... I would collect buttons and things that, like, people I was interested in. Like, I was a collector. I did a lot of, like, love spells and stuff.
Buttons? As in, like, you would
Like if,
something
take the buttons
off.
from their shirt or coat.
But like if I got into people's houses, like I would take weird little intimate trinkets, like a piece of hair or a button.
Oh man, I was gonna jokingly say pull the hair out of a brush, but you went there already.
I mean, there's a book called Gypsy Love Magic that's on my shelf in the craft room right now. That was my Bible.
Which is a word we don't use anymore.
I know.
I mean,
it is not Romani magic. That was just the title of the book. But yeah, like I was really obsessed with the idea of love, being in love, having people being in love with me, and kissing. And I didn't have a concept of sex, but I knew from softcore and stuff that I wanted to watch people have sex. Not that I necessarily wanted to have sex. My biggest fantasy for the longest time was like, I'm going to grow up and be rich so that I can have a panel in my bedroom that slides, like that moves over and opens up. And there's a couple that will just have sex for me and let me watch them have sex while I masturbate. That was my like thing I wanted to be.
So you imagined the internet.
I did. I imagined.
You willed the internet into existence.
I willed the internet into existence. And now there's a window I can open and there are people fucking for me all the time.
In fact, you can have multiple windows open and just like click between them.
And my phone. Yeah. You can have like a multi-screen experience.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of my early, as I was starting to understand what sex was and still not being able to imagine it was something I would have for myself, but knowing that the idea of it was exciting, like a lot of my thoughts about who I was going to be and what I was going to become were about like, what is going to give me access to a girl? What is going to put me in proximity to a girl that might want to kiss me?
Yeah, I also thought about what would put me in a proximity to a girl who might want to kiss me.
Right. And I still to this day, I joke about the motivation for most, joke is, there's a lot of truth in a joke. Like my motivation for most of the choices that I've made in my life, whether it's where I live, what I'm doing for entertainment or a hobby, is about like, will girls find this? Like every bullshit affectation that I built up around myself when I was 16, I still smoke a pipe because I thought girls would find it like cool and interesting. They didn't, and still don't. Wearing funky clothes, being in a punk band, hanging out with punks, like was all about like, oh, girls will find this interesting.
Wow.
And
wow.
I did the same
and it
thing
didn't work
in a very opposite direction.
Say again?
I said I did the same thing, but in a very opposite direction.
You pride yourself on being the guy who's not like other guys.
No. That's not where it was. The same motivation, 100%.
But I know that's why.
But what are you saying?
Becoming a classical violinist.
Oh,
then you could,
because it's sophisticated and cool.
I mean, I think it's cool. Like,
it is cool.
If you play the violin, I want to bone you, or be boned by you. However you want to work this out.
We've only seen Erik play the violin once,
for
so
2 seconds.
You've only wanted to bone Erik once.
Yep, and then I'm done.
Burned you.
Who are we burning there?
Yes.
So this is something I realize I have stopped now because I don't give a fuck what other people think of me now. But up until that point in my life, I did the same thing, everything. Like if I was dating somebody, I was absolutely into everything that they were into to try and make them like me.
Sure.
But yeah, like everything was like, does this hairstyle make me attractive? Does this makeup look? But I think that's just being a woman in this society.
Just being a human.
Well, I don't know. Like I
don't know that that's defined by gender or gender
I mean,
roles.
I feel like there were a lot of things I hated about myself because they weren't good enough for a man to want me.
Sure.
And my mom raised me for a man to want me. My mom said this to me at a young age, and it was a pretty fucked up thing for her to say. But hey, that's the relationship we had. She said, "You know what, Chastain? You're never going to be a girlfriend. You're either going to be somebody's wife or somebody's mistress. Nobody's ever going to just date you." And that's been true. She called it. She called it when I was like 8 years old. That's weird, but true.
Several people have dated you in the last couple of years.
Yeah, but but not. How successful has that been?
You're doing fine. So we're agreeing basically that on a sliding scale from Chastain to Erik.
Oh, a spectrum. It's definitely a scale, not a spectrum. Yeah.
That we were like, even if we didn't really know what sex was or what we wanted to do with it, that as adolescents,
it was central in
and
mind.
Post-pubescence,
yes,
that like seeing a naked lady or touching somebody or whatever was, a big motivator in what we were thinking about at the time. Right?
And a bigger motivator was that it was stuff that I knew was supposed to be bad in some way. They're like, oh, it's dirty. And the fact that it was dirty was the thing that made it interesting and made me to pursue. For me. Well, that's for me.
Yeah,
I like taboo stuff.
Yeah, I think that I think it was like morally neutral.
Yeah. I point out Hannah's been really quiet this entire time because I can tell she's uncomfortable.
Well, you could tell that because she said it.
Well, she did say it, but she's over there. She's aggressive.
I have continued to be uncomfortable and pet this dog.
She's been aggressively petting the dog.
If you're enjoying the PodPodCultcast, check out our podcast show notes at www.podpodcultcast.com or keep up with us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook at PodPodCultcast and Instagram at CultWithAV. Love us? Give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or help us continue to make this podcast possible by becoming a patron. Head over to patreon.com/PodPodCultcast. Remember, that's Cult with a V. Our patrons get access to exclusive content, cool swag, and our exclusive Patreon series, the Cultcast Media Club podcast. Thank you so much to this month's patrons, Jenny, Chip, Maggie, Kate, and Sydney. Thank you for believing in us.
Going back to my fantasy about being kidnapped and stuff, I think I've mentioned earlier that I would I think this was a conversation we had last night at a party. We were talking about how we played with Barbies as children, and I always put my Barbies in predicament bondage, and it was all about them getting saved and then fucking their savior. And a lot of my fantasies were about being kidnapped. A lot of my fantasies were about rape and things like that. So I had, I should say consensual non-consent, which is the less triggering way of putting that, I suppose. But I mean, but they were rape fantasies. They were like, I want things to be done against my will.
It's fine to have a rape fantasy.
Yeah.
It is because it is a fantasy.
Right.
Consensual non-consent is the way that as people who engage in kink act out rape fantasies through consensual acts that set up a scene.
Yes. Thank you.
Go on.
Thank you. And we'll make sure we put some links to these terms in the show notes. So did we disclaim this? We didn't disclaim this episode yet, did we?
Yeah, you did.
Oh, I did? Oh, I don't remember. Anyway, moving forward.
We have plenty of those recorded. Even
That's
I can go get one.
Plug it in.
Bring it up in post.
But yeah, so I had a lot of fantasies about that, and a lot of the play. So I should preface this with the fact that I was sexually molested at a young age, which is probably why I masturbated so early. And I was sexually molested as an early adolescent when I was 12. So I do have a history where that is a thing. And in my life, for me, those fantasies have been a way of taking control of that situation because now it's a thing that I want in a way. I guess. So, so taboo things like consensual non-consent and kidnapping and torture, and things like that. The fact that I enjoy doing those sorts of things to other people, and the fact that I kind of enjoy those things for myself. Sometimes it has to be a very specific situation and a very specific partner. I can definitely see the psychological breadcrumb trail there. how that got me from there. But, you know, I think Hannah and I are both the two like really kinky people in the room right now. So Hannah, can you talk about how your like kind of torture stuff came up and like what, you know, I mean, I used to like, do you remember Rotten.com? Did you ever go to Rotten.com?
Oh no!
Oh yeah,
I'm
like
aware of this.
it was just a website that had like pictures of dead
Some
bodies
real
and gross
fucking
stuff.
Like
I had a lot of like
that.
weird stuff that I would masturbate to. I mean, I would masturbate to boxing matches because the violence was sexy, and it was people beating each other up, and it was hot. So,
well, yeah, and I don't think that's like weird or uncommon, and I think even amongst like heteronormative super straight dudes, there's a weird homoeroticism to a lot of combat sports.
Yeah,
you know, and as
power,
and as a pro wrestling fan is a light word. There's a whole lot of homoeroticism to watching two oiled up dudes in their underwear like grapple with each other, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, but I interrupted you at engaging.
I was just wondering, like, you know, Hannah, I can kind of clearly see where I'm interested in stuff and how I got to what I'm interested in where,
Right.
Because I have strong objectification fantasies and I have strong like fucking people up fantasies. So for you, do you have a trail of breadcrumbs, or is it just something that just happened one day?
Yeah, it's a little foggy because I don't really have clear or sequential memories from young childhood, which is why I placed that, you know, awakening or whatever at like 8 or 9, because those are when I have clear memories of like the kind of fantasies that I was having. And it was about the glorification of suffering, which is all around all of us, like we've mentioned. If you look for it, like those things are internalize them. And I definitely had access to specifically Christian, just because that was my home environment, perspectives of glorifying pain. And that endurance and like submission and all of that was sort of the ultimate good.
Give me self-flagellation or bust, right? Yep.
Yeah. So that's really where it came from for me. And it wasn't until I was older, you know, later in my teens, that I connected those things, those experiences and feelings I was having with something that was sexual. And then that was a weird, you know, reckoning to have and to wrestle with, because that, you know, then something's been part of your life for a decade. So you're not going to just give it up, but also you have to like claim more for all of those things. So, I mean, and for me, it really transitioned into really explicitly rape fantasies, which is still difficult for me to process, because the motivation behind that was that rape had been built up in my mind as the most humiliating, painful, shameful thing that could happen to you. And that's why it was interesting.
Yeah.
You know, combined, I'm sure, with shame about my body and about my sexuality, that was like, well, if this is out of my control, then I'm not. And that has really dogged me. I mean, I don't spend a lot of time now dwelling on that aspect and how it connects to like specific scenes or areas of kink that are, you know, interesting to me, because I don't necessarily think that just because I enjoy something that came from a place of shame that I have to like enjoy it. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does.
But that's a difficult one to try to piece all the parts together.
I think a lot of it I think shame is a big part of that for me. There are sexual experiences I have to this day where shame is kind of the thing that makes it hot. Looking at Erik, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm ashamed of.
You're ashamed of Erik?
No, I have stuff that I'm ashamed of.
We all know the story. We don't want to hear it again.
What story?
No, sorry. Go on.
Oh.
Edit.
So yeah, I think shame is a big component, and I use the word taboo. If it feels wrong, that makes it all the hotter.
Yeah,
like
that was another back of the video guide keyword. There was a series of those movies that had taboo in the title.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what taboo meant. I just knew that it meant boobies.
Yeah, I just know that it means like questionable. Questionable. Yeah. But like things like, you know, things like rape fantasies, things like incest fantasies, all the stuff where you're like, I know that there are laws against this, and that makes it kind of sexy. So yeah, and it comes down to shame. Like I've been raped. That wasn't a thing I enjoyed in any way, shape, or form. And there's a definite line between a fantasy with a trusting partner as opposed to a horrible, horrible crime committed against you. So, yeah. But shame plays into it, yeah.
So where do we come in on the idea that that relates to, we don't have a normie here to talk to?
Yeah.
Quotey fingers?
Yeah.
So we don't.
Well,
we can't explore that.
Let's pose a question to our listeners then. Mm-hmm. If you are somebody who did not, you don't identify with what we're talking about right now, and you haven't had this experience, like how does this affect who you are now? If you're in primarily monogamous relationships that are vanilla, and by vanilla we mean like person on person, sweet making love, which is everything's good about that. Like what's the difference here? Like, what are you hearing that's different from your experience growing up? Is that a good way to pose that question? Maybe?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, okay. I just, I feel like there is a correlation between the two. I feel like growing up being I feel like when I was at every age, I was more interested in sex, even when I didn't know what sex was, than the kids around me were. Mm-hmm. Like, they were telling stories. They were telling lies about their big brother's porn.
I was always really surprised when somebody else would talk about sex with me, because I would try to initiate conversations with people about sex. And I feel like for me, that being that person, I never stopped being that person. That my current relationships and my interest in pursuing casual relationships and casual sex is related to being that same kid. So my extended thoughts about this are, I'm a sex addict. And so if I go through the traits of a sex addict, I look back at my childhood and I can see all the markers. And I can also see all of the markers for somebody who is a victim of sexual abuse. And I learned those markers at an early age thanks to like after school specials, because they loved to throw those down our throats when we were, 10. So I can definitely see where the way that I viewed sex as a kid in relation to self-worth became how addiction played out with me, because I have genetic predisposition to addiction. My mom was an alcoholic. Pretty sure other people in my family are alcoholics. So there are some addictive, something there. So I think I'm a sex addict, and I think that being a sex addict, that makes me seek out and take more risks than other people. And especially more sexual risks. And it also made, like Flashdance was one of my favorite movies growing up. We were talking, last night about how like the idea of being a stripper and being objectified in that way seemed really romanticized by a lot of films. And so, I've done sex work most of my adult life in one capacity or another. And like that comes from being a sex addict. That comes from valuing myself based on sex. And I have created a life for myself that kind of revolves around sex. Sexy parties, all my friends who are kind of also into sex and kinky stuff like I am, all that stuff. Like I view that as like I've created a little safe haven for myself. But if I had to function within a strictly vanilla group of friends and things like that, like I would still be the weirdo.
Yeah, I agree about like creating a life that is like in large part sex related. The sexy parties, the knowing people who are perfectly comfortable being naked in a casual way and having conversations about their sex lives and that kind of stuff. And that makes me think about another teenage experience, dudes watching porn together.
Yeah.
And I think, because it was usually like at a party or just at somebody's house when the folks were away, and there was usually like one girlfriend there, right? So that experience of like 6 dudes and one guy's girlfriend watching porn together was about like pushing a sexual environment, right? Like creating an environment where like We just want like other people to be interested in sex around us.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, like we've talked in the past about how you don't play at parties and stuff.
Right.
You just like to have the sexy environment. Like I like to do stuff at parties. I like to see and be seen in a sexualized context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if I fuck in front of people, it's gonna be it's gonna be fun and adventurous and showy offy because trying to do it better than everybody else is sort of a life goal for me. And now Erik is the quiet, uncomfortable one.
No, that's just...
I think that's sexually repressive environments are sex obsessed.
Oh yeah, I mean,
like so whether
but what's
you're
wrong with
focusing
sex?
on expressing
yeah,
your desires versus combating your desires and constantly focusing on that, I really think it's all the same thing.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. I had an inappropriate, I don't know how the topic came up. I had an inappropriate argument with one of my builders one time who is a like hardcore conservative guy who started into some, it was around marriage equality time and started into some serious like homophobic rhetoric. And, I let my guard against talking about this stuff, particularly with a power imbalance, someone who has something to do with my income, and I said, like, it's just about sex. Like, you're so icked out by the idea of two men having sex. That's why you care about this. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And, arguments are made against about repressive environments not being about sex, but I mean, it is like it's just
it's about controlling the population through ethical breeding. Yeah.
Well, that's broad.
No, it is. That's sexually oppressive environments are all about like controlling who your partner's with, controlling who has access to your body, and controlling how you're supposed to feel about people having access to your body. That's like like people husbandry. That's how I feel about it. And how do you feel about it? You're laughing.
Yeah. I don't disagree. No, I think it all comes from the same place. And while, not meant to invalidate anything else that's been said here, I think teenagers are just biologically motivated, and that's true across the board, and how that ends up expressing itself or like playing out over a lifetime can vary, but I think that a lot of those things are universal.
Yeah, it's a focal point either way, whether you embrace it or try to deny
repress it. Yeah.
Right. I think that some of those experiences that we tend to assume are unique to us are a lot more common, especially than we think when and feeling like we're isolated and scared to talk to others about it. Once you do open up to even a handful of people, you realize like statistically the fantasies that we enjoyed and the frequency with which we enjoyed them are not that uncommon. And I'm just going to say that I think like having a Fox's Book of Martyrs in your home that your tween has access to isn't not kinky. Like the mind that thought up those things in the first place and then recorded them in detail and then published them for decades, centuries, is not perverse. So for what that's worth.
We'll make sure we link that reference in the
we'll I'm not talking about anyone in particular here. I'm just saying that
like everybody in this room that had that experience.
Yeah, everyone, who was like, I wonder.
Absolutely. Wow. So I think I agree with you. There was a story that I heard somewhere on, it feels like a This American Life thing, but I don't even remember. I don't know enough detail, but I remember what they were talking about was the fact that, it seems pointless to send, 13-year-olds to school because they're just raging balls of hormones who can't focus on anything for about 2 years. And that time period, when you learn something, it sticks with you for life. So if you play, like the example was, if you played a video game, you could play that video game perfectly at this age and just pick it up. If you learned music at that time or a foreign language at that time, that you would know it perfectly at this age. So pretty much everything around the age of 12, 13, 14 for me, like that was my formative shit. And that's everybody's formative shit. That's the age at which our body is trying to like get us ready to like breed, and also like it's just bombarding us with all these hormones. So we have peak experiences that we are unwitting about. It's just everything's a peak experience. Everything seems really huge when you're 12 to 14. Yeah. And so I think sex plays a big part in that. And I think the sexual experiences you have, be it through seeing sex, hearing sex, talking about sex, just kind of wondering what sex is, like that sticks with you and sort of helps form who you are as an individual.
Agreed.
Yeah, that was it. It's just that I've had been thinking about that time period a lot because I've had these experiences going back to places that I spent a lot of time at that age, you know, on different podcasts and media and stuff. I've heard people talking about these video games and stuff like that were a big part of that age and of that formation. So I wanted to talk about it. And,
no, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. You know, I think we've been kind of on an emotional wellness kick, and I think we needed to break that up with some sexual levity.
Did we need to bring it up like that?
Yes.
What is this character?
I don't know.
It's a little.
Her name is Sexual Levity.
My name is Sexual Levity.
It was kind of Freddie Boom Boom Washington.
It's a little.
Hi there.
Tim Curry is what
Tim
I'm
Curry is
feeling.
what I was. Yeah.
And Tessa. Patient.
Rocker.
Okay. So do we need to put a pin on any of that, or are we just done talking about it now? So yeah, if you're out there and you're listening, if you are kinky or engaged in BDSM on the regular in some kind of lifestyle, or you are polyamorous or a swinger or what have you, however you call it. If you're non-monogamous, like, you know, did you grow up with kind of weird sex stuff being a focus for you? Or if you are not those things, did you have that same experience? Like, just, you know, share your experiences with us. You can send us you can slide into our DMs on Twitter at podpodcvlcast or Facebook at podpodcvlcast. You can send us a message, or you can send us an email, thepod@podpodcvlcast.com. And you can also contact us through our website, podpodcvlcast.com. So just
all cult with a V.
Amen.
Yep.
So yeah. Anything else for the good of the cause? Nope.
That's all I got.
Yep. Okay. All right. We're done. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Nerd.
You've just heard the Pod Cult Cast with your hosts Max, Chastain, Hannah, and Erik. Our theme song is Spencer Blues by Lobo Loco. Our break music is by Gabarino on YouTube. We have a listener survey going on right now, and we would love your feedback. If you could take 10 minutes to visit www.podpodcvlcast.com/survey2019, we would love to hear from you. Give us your feedback on our episode length, how often we release, and the content that we provide. We want to make the best podcast for ourselves and for you. Thank you so much for listening.